Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
You are listening to the TrekRanks podcast, a member of the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network. This is episode 49, featuring the top 5 Courtroom Showdowns. Welcome, Star Trek fans. I am Jim Moorhouse, and I am the host of the TrekRanks podcast. And tonight, our topic is going to be approaching the bench as we get into our top 5 courtroom showdowns in Star Trek history. So all rise for the honorable introduction of our 2 returning guests tonight. First up is Judge Advocate General Claire Little. Welcome back, Claire. It's good to have you back.
Awesome. It is good to be here. I'm excited about this. I thought long and hard about my choices.
We all did. That's the beauty of TrekRanks. TrekRanks homework is the best homework. And speaking of homework, also joining us tonight is an upstart people's defendant, Mr. Matt Hansen, who's currently in his final semester of law school. So it's just a few months away from keeping us all out of the break. Matt, welcome back, buddy.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm just like 6 months and a bar exam away from this actually being a reality for me.
Oh, I love that. And I know this was a dream for you a long time. We've been friends a while, so this is very cool. And this will be a great way to get you into your final semester. So I know
yes.
Matt's been here for our data episode, our hottest characters episodes, and what was the other one? Oh, Scenes in a Shuttlecraft was the other one.
Yes, that's right.
And Claire has done them all. Prime Directive, series premieres, doppelgangers, Mount Rushmore, and most recently our bottle shows. So all great episodes, and glad to have you guys on board. So let's run through our quick TrekRanks recalibration before we get into tonight's topic. As regular listeners will know, general order number 1 here at the TrekRanks podcast is that we love Trek, and we love to rank Trek via some deep dive topics just to get the conversation started. So hopefully when you listen to the show, you'll have some fun with it. Maybe think about a few episodes or ideas that you haven't thought about for a while.
But what is that Vulcan motto? Infinite diversity.
In infinite combinations.
And what is diversity? A celebration of differences.
And as T'Pol and Dr. Phlox like to remind us, our mantra here at TrekRanks is no wrong answers. TrekRanks is basically just a big old celebration of differences. So our show is about all the reasons we love Star Trek. We're not here to nitpick or to argue, but just to celebrate the greatness of Trek. We love it all, from TOS to TNG, straight through to Enterprise and the Kelvin timeline, and now Discovery as well. It's all fair game here on the TrekRanks podcast.
Black alert. Black alert.
And a quick reminder that Discovery Season 1 spoilers, as well as Discovery short treks, are potentially in play. And just one more reminder that we use the term episodes as a quick shorthand phrase, but the 13 films are always eligible for selection as well.
Open hailing frequencies. Hailing frequencies open. On viewer.
And you can find TrekRanks on the interface links at TrekRanks.com. And you can contact me directly at TrekRanks or at Enterprise Extra on Twitter. You can also call and leave us a message with your own picks at 609-512-LLAP. That's 609-512-5527. All right, Claire and Matt, how can everyone get a hold of you guys on the net access interface? Claire?
I'm on Twitter at isolinearchick, CHICK, not chip.
And you can find me on Twitter at mhansen0207, HANSEN. You previously could find me every Thursday on Upper Pylon 2, which was a Deep Space Nine review podcast on the Trekmate Network. But we just finished. We wrapped all 7 seasons. So
you've gone through Voyager and Deep Space Nine now. For Trek.
Yep, 7 years worth of podcasting.
Wow.
Fantastic. All right, well, when you're a lawyer, you'll do legal Trek. All right, I think we're ready to activate our level 1 diagnostic.
Diagnostic cycle will be complete in 20 seconds.
So for this week's Diagnostic Cycle, I just want to make it clear to everyone that basically you can define a courtroom showdown however you want. And that could be something big and obvious like court-martial and TOS, which is about as obvious as it gets, or maybe something really subtle like I came up with Picard throwing some legalese in the face of the Shellyak in the Ensign of Command. So who knows? That could be 2 picks we see tonight. Could be anything. But the point here is that it doesn't, actually have to take place in a courtroom. You can define it any way you want. So we have a huge slate of episodes to choose from. There's so many that fall into this category. And as we've said many times on TrekRanks, Star Trek is the ultimate anthology show. It really allows writers and producers to tell any kind of story, whether that's comedies or westerns or courtroom drama. So this topic fits right in. So before we get into our prime directives, Claire and Matt, I want to let you guys kind of set the table a little bit for your picks by telling us what's your favorite courtroom drama, TV show, or movie. Just get us set up for your picks. Claire?
Ooh, I have to say I do love some original Law and Order. Like the first 15 seasons or so. They're the kind of thing that if I have the day off or I'm sick or something, you just have that on in the background all day, do some other stuff while it's there. I love it.
It's a pretty legendary show.
It's like kind of a boring pick, but Jack McCoy getting on a tirade. I'm all for that.
Yeah, or are you on board with some Elizabeth Rome?
Oh, yeah. It does kind of bother me that all of his assistants are young, nubile women, that they never switched it up and, let a woman be the DA. But anyway.
Welcome to 90s television.
Yeah.
All right. Matt, how about you? What's your pick?
Oh, there's a whole bevy of them. I too love Law and Order, but I'm more of an SVU guy because I stand for Mariska Hargitay.
Yeah, okay, that works.
And my parents way back in the day used to love LA Law, and that's not available on DVD yet, so I'm having to go through other means to see all episodes of that. As far as movies go, it's very rare that you won't find anyone in law school who doesn't love My Cousin Vinny.
Oh, that's a good one.
That was the first rated R movie I ever saw. I was in kindergarten. Just want to throw that out there.
That is classic.
But if we're talking TV, then I got to go with the show that I'm still doing my first run through, but absolutely cannot get enough of, and that would be Boston Legal.
Yes, I knew you loved that show. That's the William Shatner himself.
We got lots of Trek alums. William Shatner's on there. Renee Aubergenois was on there for the first 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And we had back in the summer, I saw a 3-part episode that had Jerry Ryan as a defendant, and there's lots of Trek call outs in that show. But I just love the cast, aside from the Trek alums, a huge Candice Bergen fan, and James Spader and I share the same birthday. So I feel we have a special connection.
That is perfect. I haven't seen too much of that show. I actually struggle with this question for myself because I realize there's a ton of great courtroom dramas, but I kind of realize I don't really love any of them in a way that they're one of my favorite shows. I watched Suits for a bunch of seasons, but then I kind of got bored of it. Same with Good Wife. I watched Murder One back in the day, but I have no memory or recollection of it. I watched Picket Fences, but I always resented that show because it's the show that won the Emmy when it beat Next Generation back in 1984.
But of course, you don't hold a grudge.
No, never hold a grudge. So there's and Perry Mason was always, I watched that when I was a kid, but I ended up picking Law and Order because it's the one show, like Claire said, you just kind of go back to it. And it's comfort food for sure.
Well, it was on for 50 years, wasn't it? So,
pretty much 20 years.
It's got that same episodic kind of feel as Next Generation for me. They're both products of the same era. They're different genres, but they have a lot of parallels.
For sure. And I love Law and Order UK, but that only lasted for 1 season. So it's some Jamie Bamber. If you haven't seen that, seek it out because that was actually really good. Okay, that was a little preview of our Prime Directives, which we're going to get into now.
I do not concur with your captain's decision.
She's following our Prime Directive.
Define Prime Directive.
So, Claire, let's start with you. What was your prime directive in defining your courtroom showdown picks?
So I tried to stay pretty, straight and narrow for this one. I know I kind of have sometimes I pick some weird choices when I'm on this show. Not all of my options are actually in a courtroom. But they're all like clearly judicial system. They're all episodes that I feel like you could actually do in a crime drama and it would make sense. So I really tried to stick with that.
Okay, that's intriguing. Matt, how about you? How did you look at it?
So I always try to come out on this show with trying to do something out of the box. I love the courtroom-based episodes. I think they're fun. I think they're interesting. But I tried to steer clear of them in the interest of trying to find something else to bring to the table. So I noticed that most of the time in Star Trek when we're having a court or a courtroom hearing, it's usually to reprimand someone or obviously someone's in trouble. So some of my picks do take place in a courtroom, but some of them are just times when people have gotten themselves into very, very deep trouble and are being reamed out by the senior officer of the episode or movie, as it were.
Okay, that makes sense too. Also intriguing. Yeah, so with my prime directive, I definitely also struggled a bit on this one because there's so many big, massive episodes that I think fit into courtroom showdown definition, but I didn't want just a list of all Trek's biggest episodes. And normally I end up with a bunch of deep cuts on my list, but this time I actually really seeked out some deep cut picks to try to get off the beaten path. And I did that by defining my prime directive by really looking at a unique structure in how the story was told. So I really looked for a different kind of way that the episode unfolded and was portrayed. And that will become clear as we go through my picks. So I think this is going to be an awesome show. Let's get to it, Third Emoticon. Let's do the order of things.
I am a Jem'Hadar. He is a Vorta. It is the order of things.
And just a quick reminder on how we're going to go through the order of things. First, each of us will reveal our TrekRanks 5 words and a hashtag summary to tease our picks. Then we'll reveal our Courtroom Showdown and episode title, and we'll discuss a little bit why we picked it. And at the end, we'll rattle off a few secondary system selections for the picks that maybe just missed our list. And as always, if we have any duplicates tonight, you'll know it when you hear the defiant torpedoes. I think we might have some duplicates tonight, but who knows? Who knows? We'll see how everyone's prime directive plays out. Okay, Claire, let's start with you. What's your number 5 pick for your top 5 courtroom showdown?
So I love to use my time on TrekRanks to call out silly episodes. So
I can't wait. I can't wait for this.
No, it's a legit choice for this topic, but it's also a notoriously dumb episode. My 5 words are: horticulture is extremely serious business. Hashtag, you kids get off my lawn. We're talking justice from Next Generation. Okay.
This fits perfectly.
It does.
Yep.
So Justice is undoubtedly a ridiculous episode, and but I've chosen it because it really sets the tone for how Picard interprets the Prime Directive and its legal implications. And it's also probably the only Law and Order type episode I can think of that includes laws, but no legal mechanism whatsoever for the crew to mount a defense. So usually, like a crew member being accused or convicted of a crime they didn't commit or that is unreasonable is a pretty common storyline, but it's almost always resolved by the crew proving their innocence within the legal framework of the alien culture. But in Justice, that's just not possible. And also the crime is profoundly stupid and the penalty is extremely severe. So basically Picard is forced to either do something that would basically ruin the entire show and ruin his character, which is allow Wesley Crusher to be executed for stepping on a flower, or break the Prime Directive. And this was, I think, the 9th episode of Next Generation. So It's really early. Like, Picard is still a brand new character, and this is a fairly significant character development issue or episode for Picard. I don't think you realized it at the time. Again, it's a dumb episode, but in the context of the rest of the series and the character, it's actually pretty significant. Also, it's a super bizarre interpretation of a legal system that you don't see very often in Star Trek, which is this like culture that's super into their laws, but they have no legal system. It's very strange. And it's a ridiculous episode.
It is. Everyone knows it is quite ridiculous. But it is a good Picard episode because his speech at the end is like, it's pretty consistent with what you see for 7 years. And you make that point. It's really early, but...
Well, think about this. He argues with God and wins. So.
Yeah. What does God need with a legal system, right?
God, quote unquote. What does God need with a space station cloaked circling a planet?
Yeah, it's a ridiculous episode.
All right, Matt, let's move on to your first pick here for round 5. What's your number 5 Courtroom Showdown?
Okay, number 5 is, like I said, I'm trying to pick episodes/movies where, a character has done wrong and is getting reamed out by someone else. And speaking of things that not necessarily all Trek fans like, I thought it was a great scene between these 3 characters and with some funny stuff and with some drama. And normally I combine my hashtags and 5-word summaries. So my hashtag/5-word summary for this is Pointy Vulcans Embrace the Technicalities. It is the scene between Pike, Kirk, and Spock at the beginning of Star Trek Into Darkness.
Oh, that's an awesome pick. That is such a great scene, and it's totally a Courtroom Showdown type pick. I totally see why you did that, and it's so great. All right, why did you pick it? I love this
because it helps illustrate the characters. Because when that movie came out, we hadn't seen these interpretation of the characters for 4 years, and so I thought it was a really nice way to reintroduce the character dynamics. And really, I mean, aside from the comedy between Spock and Kirk, I really like the dynamic when Spock is basically thrown out of the room by Pike, and it's just Kirk and Pike talking about their differences and how they see the need for rules and what it means to be a leader. I know that it's not that's a movie that still to this day is very divisive, but I think it sets up a wonderful arc that Kirk finishes by the end of Star Trek Beyond. So it may not get payoff in the same movie, but I think it sets up the progression of the character and where it will go.
I have 2 comments. Never trust a Vulcan. And second, when I picked this Kirk storyline for these 3 movies as one of my epic arcs back in like episode 10 or 11 of TrekRanks because of scenes like this. Because right away, everyone was complaining in the first episode, how does he become captain so fast? What a joke. And here he is at the beginning of Star Trek Into Darkness just saying, yeah, you know what? You aren't ready. You're not good enough. We're taking the ship away from you. Love that. Really, really good stuff and awesome pick. Claire, what's your take on this scene from Into Darkness?
It's a movie that I've seen once a long time ago. I don't really have.
So you probably don't remember it very well.
Sorry. It's not a movie I care for.
No apologies on TrekRanks. That's not critical.
I'm sure the scene is very good, though. Actually, I don't.
You know what, though? I'm just going to say to Claire and the general audience out there, we're 6 years beyond, no pun intended, Star Trek Into Darkness. It might be worth revisiting. You still might dislike it, but,
wise words.
It's been some.
It's not that I refuse to ever see it again. It's just one of those things where it's like, if I'm going to sit down and watch a movie, it just doesn't come to mind as something where I'm like, yeah, that's what I would like to watch right now.
Well, I mean, if you ever marathon the Kelvin films.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't skip over it. If I was doing like a marathon of all the films, just the Kelvin films, I wouldn't skip over it. Just like I won't skip over Insurrection.
Love Insurrection. All right, let's move on to my number 5 pick. My 5 words in a hashtag. A matter of Klingon perspective. Hashtag Klingon lawyers and Martok. And my episode is Judgment from Star Trek Enterprise, Season 2, Episode 19. When I talked about my Prime Directive, the structure, I love the structure of this episode. It's basically a little bit like TNG's A Matter of Perspective, where you've got the Duras perspective of attacking Archer and basically calling Archer a dick, and he's protecting these rebels, and now my career is ruined. And then during this courtroom, you have Archer's viewpoint, which is Duras is basically a clown, and these refugees are innocents. And I really like the way they tell that story in two different angles in this episode, similar to, as I said, TNG's A Matter of Perspective. And I just love this courtroom recreation of the undiscovered country courtroom scene with the Klingon trial and the judges, and they even get all the way to Rura Penthe, which is, it's crazy how much they crammed into this episode. It's got this really big scope, not only with all the action going on in the recounting of why Archer's on trial, but the trial itself, the imprisonment in Rura Penthe, and then the escape. Yeah, I love this episode. I always have kind of connected with me. I think they did a great job in 44 minutes of recreating that feeling of undiscovered country. Claire, you remember this one at all?
Yes, and I totally agree with you. The amount of continuity that they cram in, but it doesn't feel like fan service or like just because they're trying to rattle off names like Duras and Rura Penthe and everyone. They craft a real story out of it while still creating so much connection and continuity with like multiple Star Trek series. It's a great episode.
Yeah, it's super fun. And I mentioned Martok because J.G. Hertzler plays the Klingon Kolos, who's the Archer's defendant in this one.
Yes.
Matt, what's your take on this one?
I really like this episode. I mean, Star Trek 6 is my favorite Star Trek movie, so anything that calls back to it is something that I appreciate. And, not to knock Enterprise because I really like it, but I think there's a reason that the series as a whole started clicking with people in the third and mostly fourth seasons. And it's for the same reason that this episode clicks with me, is that, the beauty of a prequel is that you don't want to make it all about setting up, what came before, but you want those episodes where it is like a mythology episode or where it ties back into the greater lore. And I think you got that a lot with season 4, and I think you get a lot with this episode, and I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, Claire, you said it well, that it's fan service, but like it's the good.
But it doesn't feel like fan service.
Right, it doesn't feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never label fan service as like a bad term, because there can be good fan service and there's bad fan service.
That's true. I meant it in a bad way, where it's just sort of like throwing stuff in without any real connection to the plot or characters. But everything here, there's purpose to it.
Cool. All right, let's move on to round 4. Claire, what do you got?
Okay. 5 words are: Janeway rules on life itself. # the Q is on the other foot. That would be Death Wish from Voyager.
Fantastic.
Such a witty summary for such a heavy episode.
Well, it's like, Q's not the judge this time, but he's still in a courtroom.
Right.
That's really good.
And he's his own witness. So, I mean.
Yeah, he's doing it all. Trek uses the courtroom format to interrogate philosophical and ethical issues kind of frequently. But it's almost always because, again, a beloved character or a series regular has been wrongly accused of something, and they have stakes in the verdict. But Death Wish is different because neither litigant is a regular cast member, so the entire focus is on the issue. In this case, ultimately, the second Q wants asylum, but beneath that, he wants asylum so that he can commit suicide because he's sick of being an eternal being. So because it doesn't take place with a regular cast member or someone that they can't kill off, or because they're going to be there next week, you honestly are not sure how this case is going to conclude until the very end. Like, I distinctly remember the first time I was watching this, I had no idea how Janeway was going to rule, which is pretty rare in Star Trek for you not to be like, this character who's, in dire straits is also the second in command of the ship. They're not going to die, kind of thing.
Such a great point.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to have dramatic tension when it's like the star of the show.
Yeah, so true.
Also, because we aren't necessarily as invested in who is going to come out on top in this trial, you really can just like tackle the meatiness of the issue itself. So, it's not so much about like making sure our favorite character doesn't get executed. It's about like talking about the philosophical and ethical issues and really like what is the right outcome.
It's such a deep topic.
It is. Plus, there's like, there is a little bit of fun in the episode. We get to see Will Riker and Sir Isaac Newton. I mean, I think Sir Isaac Newton might be, is he the only real person to appear in two different series?
This is one of those existential things because those were holographic recreations.
Right. But I mean, right. Yeah. And obviously, I mean, Stephen Hawking is the only person to actually play himself. But I mean,
or a holographic representation of himself.
Okay.
This was actually Isaac Newton. There's a very subtle difference. Hey, it's TrekRanks. We're nitpicking.
Yeah, no nitpicking.
Matt, what's your take on this one? It's an awesome pick.
Aside from the fact that Quinn apparently saved Woodstock, and that was an important moment in human history.
Yeah.
Yeah. Q is campy, so I guess it makes sense that John Delancey Q would care about Woodstock.
But you know what? I really love this episode. It's up there in the top 5 Q episodes. It's definitely the best Q episode on Voyager.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, you don't see. I love Voyager, but a lot of it was, anomaly of the week, especially early on. And when it tackled such a controversial topic like suicide, I don't know. You have to be very careful when you're talking about that, because it's not something like racism where, we, at least most of the people, although, some have been coming out of the ward work during Discovery and that I didn't know were there. But, people have different feelings on suicide. Some see it as a humane sort of way to end life, and some see it as, anathema to life. So I thought the way they handled it was really good. And I agree with what Claire said. This is one of those times where you don't know what the outcome is. Normally, when you have an episode like this, they're going to, the Star Trek, the crew is going to rule in favor of the oppressed. But that's not a guarantee here. And really, you see it in the episode that Janeway was going to rule against Quinn until they did the demonstration of what the continuum was like. So
they weren't preachy about it, and they also weren't. I felt like they really walked a fine line because, yes, Janeway does rule in one way, but it didn't feel like she was necessarily ruling against the other perspective.
Right.
It feel like she was weighing ethical judgment in general.
Yeah, super deep, heavy topic, handled perfectly. Exact opposite of justice, which you need. So, okay, Matt, what's your round 4 pick?
So speaking of bleak outcomes, I also picked one where, Claire was talking about how when it comes to courtroom episodes, usually our characters are going to be exonerated or they're not going to be put to death and life will continue as usual. But what happens when, someone is put on trial and really loses everything? And that's something that stood out to me. It was so dark, so bleak, both literally and figuratively. So my number 4, #the accused cannot be heard. It is the trial and stripping of rank of Michael Burnham at the end of Battle of the Binary Stars.
Wow. I love it. Great pick. I that was on my secondary systems to mention because I really did enjoy that.
It's wonderful. I think that, ends on such a not hopeless, but like I said, bleak note. And really it sets up Burnham as a character that you're going to watch for the rest of the season. This is the first time I think that we're watching Star Trek from a perspective of someone who is now considered an outlaw. I mean, I know we had Tom Paris, but he wasn't the focus of Voyager. Michael Burnham is, at least for the first season, was the main character.
I tell you, it's an awesome pick. It's one of my favorite cliffhangers. I was literally floored at the end of this, thinking, where's the setup for this? And obviously the context is for Kings is basically like a second pilot.
Yeah.
Discovery was launched. But at the end, when they say she's going to prison
for life,
it was like, what did I just hear? What have I mean, that was a great, really clever tricky way to introduce a series and a character.
And like I said, it's not often when a trial goes so badly for one of my main characters that, like I said, she literally loses everything, her career and her freedom.
Yeah, great point. Claire, what's your quick take on Battle at the Binary Stars and Michael Burnham's?
Well, it's one of the few times in Star Trek where the outcome of this trial or whatever, the outcome of, frankly, anything continues on into that rest of that season. I think, obviously Discovery is much more serialized than most other Star Trek. There are obviously some exceptions to that. But so one of my pet peeves, a positive pet peeve, I guess, about Star Trek is that there's that very Star Trek ending where like everything gets wrapped up in the last 5 minutes and usually never gets mentioned again. And that can be frustrating depending on the severity or how serious the plot is. There are things that probably should continue to impact a character beyond the end credits of that episode. And I think Discovery did a fantastic job continuing to show how this impacted Michael Burnham, especially in the first 3 or 4 episodes once she gets to Voyager or to Discovery. It really impacts not just her, but the way the rest of the crew interacts with her. And yeah, it's good.
No, it's really well said. And yeah, it is. That's part of the show that obviously it's in the 90s. And
oh yeah, I love how episodic 90s television is. So
it's the nature of when it was of the time. But obviously Discovery has changed that. Awesome pick, Matt. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's the first time where there's some severe negative consequences, because as much as I love the movies, Kirk's punishment for defying the orders of the Starfleet CNC was to get a new ship. So, I mean,
yeah.
All right, let's move on to my round 4 pick. And this might be a TrekRanks first. We have 6 picks to open this week's show from 6 different incarnations of Trek.
Oh.
I love that. So we're going to go 6 for 6. My pick is from the original series. So the only one we haven't touched on yet is Deep Space Nine. So my 5 words in hashtag: Talosians manufacture court-martial drama. Hashtag Mendez was never even there. And it is The Menagerie from TOS, one of my all-time favorite episodes. It's classic Trek. I feel like this episode has everything. And the courtroom scenes, again, my structure point of my Prime Directive, I love that they framed the viewing of the old footage from the cage. And we've talked about this before on TrekRanks, but it's just, 15 episodes into Star Trek, you're getting this 2-parter with all this extra footage just brilliantly, cohesively integrated into this amazing story of Kirk and Spock.
And kudos for them actually calling out in the episode and giving a reason why the footage is presented the way it is and is edited the way that it is.
It actually, this episode I always point to, it's one of the reasons for Star Trek's longevity. It added so much layers to the world building immediately right off the bat. This is a total tangent, but at one point in Roddenberry's initial, drafts of Spock, he was a Martian, right?
Yeah.
If he had stayed a Martian, Star Trek wouldn't be what it is today.
Yeah.
It's not real science.
He would have been Martian, he would have been red, and he would have had a tail.
Right. So the fact that all these things kind of came together, and this is one of those reasons for Star Trek's longevity. I love the courtroom drama. It's so much fun. The set, the framing, and this little trick where Pike is still on active duty, and Spock knew that, so he has a 3-officer quorum. And the whole court martial is basically set up just to keep Kirk occupied while he gets Pike back to Talos for. So one of the great episodes. And my hashtag, it tricks me every time when you think, Mendez, he wasn't even there the whole time.
Because you don't see it coming.
No, you don't. He just disappears. You're like, oh man.
He's acting like like a real admiral the whole time.
Yeah, it's awesome. Claire, any take on this one?
I have talked about Menagerie on TrekRanks before. In fact, the last time I was here, I think.
That's right. It was a bottle. Yeah, you picked it as a bottle show.
Yeah, so that is, not to spoil the rest of my list, but it is not on my list for this episode, specifically because I had already talked about it. But yeah, it's, I mean, not only is it a brilliantly written and conceived show, just in general, knowing that it was the origin of that episode and just the fact that they had to incorporate this entire 50 minutes of other footage that was never written with the intention of being part of another episode or incorporate. I mean, it's amazing that it came together as well as it did, given the really unusual circumstances of the way it was written.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Matt, any other takes before we move on to round 3?
I love this episode. And like I said, this episode and the old footage from the cage makes me really, really excited to see what they end up doing with Pike and Spock and their relationship in this next season of Discovery. Yeah, I really love this episode. I love seeing that dynamic. And really, aside from watching the old footage, which presents a very interesting look into the Enterprise's past, even with no dialogue, even with the beeping that everyone makes fun of these days, there's such a great dynamic between Spock and Pike, to the point where, like, one of my favorite scenes in the whole episode is right at the beginning of the first part when it's Pike and Spock alone, and Spock is sort of hinting at what he's intending to do, and all Pike can just flashes no.
Yeah.
And it's emotional without having any dialogue on one of the actors' parts.
Yeah, agreed. And editor's note, this episode, normally TrekRanks we release them pretty quick after we record them, but we're recording this one early because of Matt's impending semester of law school, so they wanted to get it on the books first. So we will have seen the first few episodes of Discovery by the time this drops, and it's so cool to think that the stuff we're going to see is in between the cage and the menagerie.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, and I'm sure they will, but I'm hoping that, the menagerie showed a nice dynamic between Spock and Kirk. Spock and Pike, even though they didn't have too many scenes together. What I'm hoping that they can evolve on, not only just from that episode, is the reason why Spock would risk death to bring him back to Talos 4 later. I'm hoping that's part of this season.
We'll
it has to be.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out the season. But there really was some emotional scenes between them, Matt. When you go back and watch it, where Spock is like bending over and saying, "No, I have to do this.
Right.
I have to do this for you," and it's really emotional. Well, you just said it when he flashes, "No."
Well, and considering that you've got an actor wearing a ton of face makeup who basically can't really emote through it, and then against an actor playing a very unemotional character, and there's beep. I mean, there's like. It is very impressive how emotional those scenes are, considering everyone involved and their character dynamics. I mean, Spock can't really emote that very much, and neither can Pike.
It's awesome. All right, let's move on to round 3. Claire, what's your soup round pick?
All right, 5 words, excellent writing, even better performances. #Garrick and Odo finally meet. So this is not really a traditional courtroom pick, but I'm going with the interrogation scenes in the Diaz cast from Deep Space Nine.
Nice.
Okay, and they do really meet there. And this is 7 for 7 now. Deep Space Nine. So our first 7 picks are 7 different incarnations. First time in TrekRanks history. Claire, continue.
Love it. So interrogation scenes in general are kind of hard to do well, I think, even for a gritty type crime drama. It's hard to make them believable, I guess, maybe just for me as a viewer. They tend to be very exposition-y and just sort of like they serve a story purpose. They don't usually serve a very strong character purpose in terms of, just because they're not usually done very well. But the interrogation scenes between Garrick and Odo and the Diaz cast are so good. Especially for Star Trek, which doesn't do a lot of interrogation scenes in general, and usually they are more of the sort of lawful good Federation interrogation scene. There are exceptions to that, but they do so much to inform and expand the characters involved. The writing is so good, and you really feel like it's a battle of equals, but also complementary to one another. Like they're not fighting against each other, but they are. It's just really, really nuanced. And considering that the 2 actors are wearing a ton of face makeup and they're still able to emote so subtly, it's just huge. And it really informs us. You learn so much about the two characters and their relationship with each other going forward. It's just really fantastic. If it's been a while since you've seen this, go back and watch this episode. It's really good.
Those were 2 top 10 episodes of TrekRanks on our DS9 list. And you're right. It's epic. It's a game changer for those two characters. And you're right that those scenes are hard to pull off in that way. And you get so much out of it with those two. Both of them. You just learn so much about both characters. Awesome pick.
Yeah, and it's an interrogation scene where you actually don't learn anything at all from those scenes from the perspective of the purpose of the interrogation. So like Garrick doesn't get anything useful out of Odo.
Right.
Odo doesn't get anything useful out of Garrick as far as being able to escape or anything. It's
character.
Like the interrogation fails on a superficial level, but it absolutely succeeds on a character level.
Yeah. Matt, what's your take on the Dias cast?
Well, what I appreciate about it, going off of what Claire just said, is that neither of them learns anything about each other, and yet they were both in their perfect element to do that.
Yeah.
Where, they're put in a situation where they both should excel, and they both end up breaking down. I mean, Odo has probably given so many interrogations at this point, so when he's on the receiving end of this, it's probably, he doesn't think it's going to be anything. And then Garrick, we've learned throughout the course of the episodes he's appeared in before, loves doing interrogation stuff. He misses doing this stuff. Right. And by the end of it, obviously Odo doesn't because he's being tortured. But, Garrick takes absolutely no pleasure in this interrogation. And the thing that he thought he loved is the thing that broke him in this episode.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Awesome pick, Claire. I love it. Good outside of the box one that I never would have considered. Matt, what's your round 3 pick?
My round 3 pick, another movie. A lot of these were movies on my list here, but again, love it when a character is being reamed out, and this again starts the arc that I was talking about earlier. Hashtag Kirk the cheater always prospers. Hashtag Medea is a judge. The Kobayashi Maru review board scene in Star Trek 2009.
Oh, that's cool. Yes. I forgot about that one. That is such a courtroom showdown. And the Kirk and Spock.
Yeah. That's how they meet, and both of their arcs in terms of characters that interact with each other start right there.
Fantastic. That is an awesome pick. Claire, do you remember this one? Please tell me.
Yes, I do.
Medea is, it took me a while to figure out what you meant by Medea is the judge. But no.
Well, that's Tyler Perry.
Perry.
Yeah, that was a little bit jarring the first time I saw that. No, I think it's a really fantastic example of power of the Kelvin timeline in these movies, of taking two characters or a scene or an incident that how it goes and sort of turning it on its head in a really interesting way. I thought it was a really great nod to and subversion of the Spock walking in on, or Kirk, I guess, walks in on Spock's, whoever walks in on the Kobayashi Maru in
Wrath of Khan. It was Kirk.
Yeah, okay.
He comes to the view screen, light behind him.
Yeah. And then he and Spock walk away past a guy who's polishing the floor.
And yet it still fits. Like even if they weren't different timelines, the way that Spock in Wrath of Khan says your final solution was, shall we say, unique, implies that he was either there or knew about it, and then you get to see that dynamic played out, albeit in a different timeline. And as soon as they mentioned the words Kobayashi Maru, and we were actually going to get shown what it was like when Kirk took the test, I started geeking out in the theater.
Yeah, well, and it's totally reasonable that even Prime Spock, younger, would not have appreciated Kirk's cheating the way that you see him kind of chuckle about it in the Wrath of Khan. Like, that's an older Spock.
And that's years after them being friends. Here in 2009 is when they first meet.
Exactly. So it's totally reasonable that was Prime Spock's, if he was there or the first time he heard about it, he might have had a similar reaction. I don't know.
Yeah. Brilliant pick, Matt. I love it. Another one I had not considered, but absolutely fantastic. Courtroom Showdown. Love it. Okay. I'll move on to my round 3 soup round pick. And my 5 words and a hashtag Voth scientists drive the narrative. Hashtag RIP Hogan. And this is distant origin from Voyager season 3. And again, for my structure of kind of the unique structure of the way this episode's told, basically the first third of this, like the first 15 minutes of this episode, maybe even the first 20, is all told from the perspective of the Voth dinosaurs. Basically.
It's kind of like a Discovery Channel documentary, isn't it?
Really, it's super the way you don't see the ship. Actually, I remember now. I looked at it. It's 15 minutes of just the Voth scientists, and then about 5 minutes of them walking around the ship before they get caught. Before you actually start seeing this story told from the point.
Yeah, them walking around the ship and hypothesizing and basically doing a documentary. That's my favorite part of that episode.
Yeah,
really, really cool. And I love that. So it comes down to the final 10 minutes or 15 minutes of this episode is basically the Voth scientists on trial, trying to argue with these doctrine-obsessed leaders of the Voth. And I love it because this is another one of those episodes that kind of becomes a little bit prescient when you look at it in today's climate. Basically, their whole thing, this is alternative facts. I mean,
yeah,
it's alternative facts, and it's really religion versus evolution.
Yeah, it's that too, but it's clearly that, and obviously doctrine sucks. That's it's one of my mantras here. But the doctrine is religion, by the way, people. Sorry. But it's more than that because it's also it's the first time when I've rewatched this for this episode. The alternative facts thing that's come up in our last couple of years. Basically, he's saying, here are the facts. I have the genetic markers. It's irrefutable. And they're saying, no, that's your opinion of the facts. Our facts are this. It's like scary that's 20 years ago. And we're here in 2019 with the moronic right-wing racists basically using the same tactic.
So what you're saying is Minister Odala is basically Kellyanne Conway if she was a judge.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm sorry, that's insulting to Minister Adawa's makeup. Her prosthetic is so beautiful.
I know, I agree. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I was trying to make a dig.
No, that's awesome. No, I get it.
Yeah, it's really about these guys maintaining this myth just to keep their power. And that's terrifying. I hate that stuff.
Yeah. I distinctly recall watching this episode when it aired and being blown away by it. I was 12 and living in a very conservative religious town. And we were like the only car in town with a Darwin fish on our car. And I distinctly remember watching this episode, and it was pretty revolutionary, not for my household, but just for my town.
Yeah.
It was, I had never seen anything like it in terms of tackling that topic on TV before. Not in that way, anyway.
It's one of my favorites in the way in terms of they frame that.
I was really young when it was broadcast the first time too, and when you're young that much, I mean, way to hook you. I mean, what kid doesn't want to love a dinosaur episode?
Oh yeah, exactly.
which by the way, I also love is the throwaway fact that, hey, it's canon that dinosaurs were spacefaring on Earth. And
that's true.
Okay, everybody complaining about everything that's canon.
Plus, I love just, a little bit of meta knowledge that this episode was written and broadcast right the summer in 1987, right before the summer where Lost World Jurassic Park came out. Coincidence? I think not.
I didn't know that. By the way, it's a Brandon Braga and Joe Menosky script, and those two guys are always out there with their concepts. So love that. Great episode. All right, let's move on to round 2. Claire, what's your number 2 pick?
All right. This is a very obvious pick, but I had to choose it anyway. 5 words are McCarthyism comes to the Enterprise, # justice for Simon Tarsus, and it's the drumhead.
I struggled to keep this episode out of my thing, and I did, but this is probably my favorite episode of Next Generation.
That's awesome. I kept it off my list because I went with this structure Prime Directive. So I'm glad you picked it because it's one of my all-time favorite episodes. Love Simon.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I was kind of worried that maybe all three of us would avoid it because it's too obvious and then it wouldn't get mentioned. So
Right.
No, I'm so glad that you put it on their list because, like I said, this is absolutely my favorite episode of Next Generation.
I mean, I just rewatched it again this afternoon just to soak it all in again. It's a lot of Star Trek remains prescient, but this is an extremely appropriate episode that just probably will never stop being topical just because these are issues we must always keep on top of. I think part of why it's so powerful is because in this case, we're not looking at the other sort of being the oppressive civilization or having the broken judicial system. It's not, the guilty until proven innocent thing is usually something that the Cardassians do or the Romulans do it, or maybe it's some random alien of the week, but not the good and virtuous Federation. The Federation's never wrong. The Federation's always standing up for the right thing, except here. And I think that's what makes it so sinister and dangerous and powerful. Watching Picard, especially through the first half of the episode, kind of struggle with his growing discomfort of the proceedings while still respecting Nora Sati and respecting the process of this investigation is fascinating. And you see when he finally decides, no, he's got to stand up and say something. He cannot stay silent. It's just powerful. And then I
brought down bigger men than you, Picard.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually think, there's a lot of focus on Picard and how strong he is in this episode, but I think Worf, his character goes through a lot in this episode.
Yeah,
it's subtle and it's quiet and it's kind of in the background, but the final scene with him and Picard in the conference room talking about the fact that Worf totally got pulled in. He got sucked in by Nora Sati's whole paranoia witch hunt. I hate to say witch hunt, but this was an actual they actually look like, everyone, is when the person is not guilty or has not done anything. That's an actual witch hunt. But Worf, he was complicit in a lot of it until the very end.
And they did it in a way that doesn't make him come off as a bad person or a misguided person. They base it off the fact that he's a tactical officer. He's the chief security officer of the Federation flagship.
Absolutely.
He would be gung-ho about rooting out spies.
I totally agree. They don't do a disservice to his character at all. And they don't make him unlikable or unpleasant. I think that's, again, part of the power is he doesn't become this mustache twirling villain because he's going along with it. He's just doing his job.
Right.
And that's what makes it scary, that just doing your job, if you do that long enough, and if your job starts to veer off into bad territory, you yourself are now veering off into bad territory.
Also something amazingly relative in today.
Yeah.
Well, and the beauty of it, too, is that it started off as a legit investigation. There was saboteurs aboard the Enterprise. There was, and that was a legit thing that they were going after. And then it spirals out of control.
And at the point where, if you stop accepting evidence of, actually the warp core breach was entirely an accident and unrelated to this actual saboteur, they disregard that because it doesn't fit the narrative that they've already put together, which is, quarter Romulan kid is lying about something. And yeah, he is. He's lying about being Romulan. He's not lying about having committed crimes.
An awesome courtroom showdown for sure. One of Trek's best. All right, Matt, let's go to your round 2 pick. What do you got?
Well, my round 2 pick is a courtroom episode, but it's not the reason I picked it. I picked it for a very specific scene. Again, Next Generation. It's just one that always stuck out to me. And even though it's an episode that shows me that even if I can't have the same sort of, guidance perfection that he has, why I think Picard is such a great moral compass. And my hashtag is #you don't deserve to wear that uniform. It's the scene between Wesley and Picard in The First Duty, which is a courtroom episode, but I picked it for that scene.
Fantastic. No, that's on my secondary systems. I'm so glad you picked it. Great pick.
Like I said, the courtroom stuff is good. The ready room scene makes the episode for me.
That's a cool twist on it. Claire, what's your take on The First Duty?
I'm glad you put it on your list because that was another one that I I did not put on mine, but it was on my short list. And I think you're totally right. The courtroom part it's the least impactful. And I don't mean that from a writing perspective or an episode perspective, but in some way, especially for Wesley, it's kind of the least impactful to his character and to him personally. It's getting chewed out by Picard, even though there are no actual consequences to finding out how disappointed Picard is in him. That's the punishment. Like,
for sure.
That's what's significant.
Yeah, but I mean, if I was in his shoes, that would even feel worse.
That's what I'd be like crapping my pants if Picard's yelling at me like that. But again, there's no actual consequence to it in terms of his career or his place at Starfleet Academy.
Well, I mean, they get held back a year, don't they?
Yeah, but not because of Picard chewing up.
Right. Okay.
That's what I mean.
I was about to say, don't sell those courtroom scenes short, because the scene where he's testifying and basically says, and they like quiz him on it and say, okay, so you're saying you were in this position at this time? And he's like,
yeah. But
and then they flash up the overt starburst, and he's just like, uh-oh. That was
like, for Wesley's character, the fact that he does eventually go off with the Traveler, like he's not, it turns out that Starfleet is maybe not exactly what he doesn't fill the hole or fill the need in him that he thought it would. I just think, finding out that someone that you've looked up to your entire life is deeply disappointed in you, that is going to hurt more than having some random admiral question you about something in a courtroom. That's what I mean.
Not just that, the guy who trusted you enough to give you your big break.
That was hard.
Yeah.
Awesome pick, Matt. I'm so glad that's on the list. All right, so round 2, I'll close it out. We have an all TNG round with 4 episodes. What? Did someone say 4 episodes? Because I'm cheating and I'm picking 2 episodes. And my 5 words in a hashtag: Q's Mankind Trial bookends TNG.
Yes.
Hashtag guilty provisionally. And it's all good things, an encounter at Farpoint from TNG.
Oh, so you're picking 2 of them.
That's actually 4 episodes.
4 of them.
I know. I had it in my notes. I'm like, I think this is a TrekRanks first. I have picked 4 episodes with 1 pick, and
I was going to say, speaking of law episodes, you're setting TrekRanks precedence here.
I love it.
Now, if someone picks 4 episodes, you have to accept it.
Hey, well, one of our rules at TrekRanks is the more episodes you pick, the better, because that's more Trek to talk about. So, all right, so I picked this one again. The structure. I mean, what else can you say about the structure? They linked these 2 episodes across 7 years in perfect symmetry that it bookends the entire series in such a powerful way. It's such an inspired idea, again, by Brandon Braga and Ronald D. Moore, to close it out with all good things, revisiting Q. I think it's the best TV series finale I've ever seen. It's for sure one of them. And the courtroom scenes with Q as the judge and judging mankind, I love the whole setup. And I love that in Encounter at Farpoint, you actually get to see a little bit of the mid-21st century post-atomic horror, as I think Data or Picard refers to it. And you have the great Q quote, "You will now answer the charge of being grievously savage race." So it's awesome. It's the best.
I like it when he calls back to it, like when in All Good Things, when Picard says, you put us on trial for being a dangerous race. And I believe my exact words were a dangerous, savage child race.
Yeah.
Claire, what's your take?
I'm so glad you included these. I continue to stand by my assertion that I made during the ranking the premiere episode of TrekRanks, that yes, I did put Encounter at Farpoint as my number 1 Star Trek premiere episode, and I stand by it because of those courtroom scenes.
I think I probably had it as my 5th. I can't remember. But.
Yeah, I mean, okay, the cosmic jellyfish are goofy. Like, a lot of it's really goofy, but those courtroom scenes, not only are they just well written and as a standalone thing, they set the table for so much of what makes post original series Star Trek, and for the character, I mean, so good.
And Claire, that's a perfect segue because I want to play this Q quote for you guys.
I sincerely hope that this is the last time that I find myself here.
You just don't get it, do you, Jean-Luc? The trial never ends. We wanted to see if you had the ability to expand your mind and your horizons. And for one brief moment, you did.
When I realized the paradox.
Exactly. For that one fraction of a second, you were open to options you had never considered. That is the exploration that awaits you. Not mapping stars and studying nebula, but charting the unknown possibilities of existence.
I love that quote. It basically was the end of all good things, and I'm secretly hoping that there's somehow that's a little bit of a precursor to the Picard series, and somehow that'll be addressed a little bit.
Well, and really, when you think about it, that quote is the perfect thesis summation of Next Generation.
Correct.
Yeah.
As Claire and Matt just said, perfect. All right, let's move to our round one picks. Claire, what's your number one Star Trek Courtroom Showdown pick?
Okay, another obvious one, but it's quite possibly the best episode of Star Trek ever made. Sorry.
Please pick it.
Yeah, my 5 words are Star Trek at its finest. # is that vanity? And that would be Measure of a Man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's an obvious pick for this episode of TrekRanks.
I'll say one of the episodes that inspired me to take up a career in law.
See, there you go. That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. I went back and forth about whether this or Drumhead should be to take the top spot, but I ultimately chose Measure of a Man because it's got a positive message and a positive outcome. And I feel like as important as the Drumhead is, I don't know, I wanted to showcase a show that demonstrates the positive power of the legal system working as intended to defend someone who might not even have civil rights according to the trial and the proceedings. And I think one reason this episode is so potent is that Maddox is not a mustache-twirling villain. He's not cartoonishly evil. He's not even a deliberate bigot. He does not realize that he's a bigot. He's a realistic adversary, and he's someone who's acting from lack of experience with data or with someone different from him. And that makes Maddox a very recognizable character. We all know someone who's Maddox. And maybe we ourselves used to be Maddox. Maybe all of us are Maddox in our own way. But the fact that Maddox is able to get some personal growth between Measure of a Man and Data's Day, for me, it gives me hope that the Maddoxes that we know or might be ourselves can change. It's not sappy, even though it has a positive outcome. It's a feel-good episode that's also a really deep episode at the same time. It works for me. And I have to say, I saw the extended version of this in theaters.
I did too.
Oh,
yeah. And so I was in San Francisco. The theater was absolutely packed.
Yep.
This was either a week before or a week after one of the Supreme Court rulings about same-sex marriage. And I honestly can't remember if it was California specific or nationwide. I think it was California specific.
But I think it was California specific.
Yeah. The place erupted into cheers when Data was awarded the right to choose. It was I had chills. I mean, like, all of us had seen this episode before multiple times. We all knew what was going to happen. And yet it was really electric in the theater. And it was an experience that I'll get.
I mean, I don't know about you, but when I heard that there was 20 some extra minutes and that I was going to get to see 20 extra minutes of TNG that I had never seen before.
Oh, yeah.
That was awesome.
And they're good. It actually adds to the show. I think we've all seen cuts where they insert deleted scenes and you're like, yeah, I know why they deleted that. In the case of Measure of a Man, it added to the episode in a good way.
Is it just words to you, or do you fathom the meaning? I love what you said about Maddox, because he really is. I mean, he's just ignorant, right? He's not dangerous. He's not. I mean, he's trying to just.
He's dangerous in the sense that
correct.
He has the power to do something dangerous, but he doesn't think of it as dangerous. He thinks of it as helpful.
Yeah, he's not maliciously dangerous.
Yeah, he thinks that he is going to benefit mankind.
Yeah, it's
from recreating multiple, armies of datas. And
well, I just want to say I'm so glad you picked this because Matt and I, when we did our data episode, nobody picked a Measure.
That's another reason why I did choose it, because I was like, I knew that
really
made
stood out because we all were like dodging it. So awesome that you picked it this, because I was a little worried that, oh shoot, if it doesn't get picked, that would suck.
No.
All right, man.
Like I said, it was the thing that inspired me. One of the things that inspired me to take up a career in law for exactly the things that Claire said, in the sense that, people like to view people who are in law or are lawyers as, a bunch of shysters, a bunch of ambulance chasers, backstabbers, will do anything for money. But this actually shows that, being a zealous advocate for someone can lead to a lot of good. And, whether you're a prosecutor, whether you're a defense attorney, whether you're a civil attorney, you have the power, when you're a lawyer, to make real change and real difference. And that was one of the things that really attracted me. And I can't say enough good things about this episode. I will say that as far as the extended cut goes, I agree with Claire that they did a good job of making Maddox seem like a bigot. The one fall that they have on that is a deleted scene that I think is rightfully deleted, is when he breaks into his going away party.
Oh yes, yeah.
That turns him into a bigot.
Yes, that's a very uncomfortable scene.
You can never get enough. You can never get enough of Admiral Nakamura.
Right. But aside from Picard's, ending speech, which I think is wonderful, the scene that really sticks with me in the episode is the scene between Picard and Guinan.
Yeah.
When you have this woman who, even with the meta-knowledge that she's African-American and the meta-knowledge that she just won a Golden Globe for The Color Purple, which dealt with, a lot of racism and undertones of slavery, is the one that's reminding him of this, of Earth's past.
Yeah, I think it's really, Melissa Snodgrass wrote that scene beautifully, because she doesn't have Guinan make the connection between slavery and an army of disposable people. She has Picard make that connection, even though clearly Guinan is leading him there. But
yeah, and I love that her response is, well, I think that's a little harsh. Just to get Picard to realize that it's not harsh.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a really, really good Guinan scene. Yeah.
Legendary Trek, to say the least. All right, well, Matt, I'm dying to hear what's your number one pick.
My number one pick, I'm sure most people can guess it, but it's some of my favorite Star Trek that's ever been put to celluloid. But I love it more than just the obvious surface reasons. So my hashtag is "Don't wait for the translation." Star Trek VI: The Klingon Trial of Kirk and McCoy.
Yes.
Yeah, thought that's where you were going.
So glad you included this.
Again, it shows great, cultural development for the Klingons. It's a very powerful courtroom scene. But the reason that I think it sticks with me in terms of Kirk's arc in that movie is that when his own private thoughts and, you could even say racist speech is used against him in court, that's the first time that he's had to come face to face with his own bigotry against the Klingons, and it's ultimately his bigotry that's going to condemn him, at least in that courtroom scene. And when he's forced to admit that those were his words, I love the reaction.
Yeah, you're right. It's a great moment. I'm so glad you picked this.
And it starts him on the arc for the rest of the series the rest of the movie that, maybe I am thinking in such relic old ways, and that we need to go to the undiscovered country of the future to survive as a species and make new allies.
Yeah, I think he's labored under the idea that his bigotry against Klingons does not actually get in the way of him being a captain, or doesn't make a difference, but it really does. Yeah,
well said. I mean, it's such an epic all-time moment in Trek. It's so memorable.
And a great cameo by I love that Michael Dorn is his defense attorney.
Right.
Yes.
And it's close to the end of what you're seeing of this character, so it's a big moment, and it's a big realization, and the way it plays out here, and a little bit more in
Judgment.
Yeah. No, I was going to say in Generations.
In Generations.
Seeing kind of the end game of Kirk. Yeah, I mean, it really defines his character in probably good and bad ways.
It's just such a powerful scene, because when you have, Kirk, who is lost in the throes of his racism on one side. You have, Worf, General Worf on one side. And when you have Christopher Plummer as the prosecutor, I mean, just great things are going to come out of that scene.
Plus, it's one of the few times that Kirk cannot talk his way out of a situation.
Right.
You're right. He absolutely just has to say, yep, I did say that, and I meant it.
Not only can he not talk himself out of a situation, it's his own words that are going to condemn him.
Let them die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome pick, Matt. And I love that it bookended my judgment pick in round 5. So that's cool. All right. Let's close it out. My round 1 pick. And again, my Prime Directive was all about structure. And I love the structure of this episode. So it's definitely a deep cut. 5 words and a hashtag. The truth must be one. Hashtag a warrior's bloodlust. And it is Rules of Engagement from Deep Space Nine Season 4. And this is, if you remember this episode, someone where Worf is on trial for blowing a Klingon transport vessel out of the sky.
Another honorable mention on my list.
Yeah,
awesome.
The structure is really super clever production with the fourth wall breaking technique. The director, by the way, was LeVar Burton. He did an awesome job. Where the characters are speaking directly to the camera and kind of recounting what happened, and they're jumping between conversations. It's something you very rarely see in Trek. And it was a great way to tell this story. And I feel like this episode is the single most Law and Order episode in Trek history. I mean, the whole thing begins with a trial. The whole thing is about this trial. It's the prosecutor and the defendant going toe-to-toe and kind of baiting each other, where Ch'Pok, the awesome Klingon prosecutor, is kind of baiting Sisko and Quarks, and then he's baiting Worf on the stand. I just love it. And the whole thing's about, he admits right off the bat, we don't have to hear about the facts. This is about what's in Worf's heart as a Klingon. What's his bloodlust? What did that tell you in terms of his actions?
Something that would never fly in a real courtroom, I would just say. You always want to talk about the facts.
Well, but it would. And the twist on it is that because the judge, who's a Vulcan, who's awesome, says, you can't do that here. And he said, oh, I'm sorry. Worf, you don't want to talk about this? You have something to hide? And Worf's like,
he baits him.
I don't care. It's really, really well done.
Admiral, if there are no facts in dispute, then this hearing would appear to be at an end.
We Klingons are not concerned with matters of fact and circumstance. What matters to us is what was in Worf's heart when he gave the order to fire. Was he just a Starfleet officer doing his duty, or was he a Klingon warrior reveling in the battle? That is why I am here. Because if he was a Klingon, lost in the bloodlust of combat, only we can judge him, not you.
We can't put a man's heart on trial. It's a subjective issue that cannot be reasoned in a court of law. I ask that the advocate be limited to arguing the evidence in this case.
Someone told me this was a search for the truth. Should we not follow that search wherever it takes us?
Ch'Pok, the Klingon litigator, for me, it's like he's one of my favorite Klingons because he's not just an administrator, he's a warrior in the courtroom, the way he attacks this. And my 5 words was, the truth must be one, is his quote to Sisko. And I love at one point he says, because this is just an extradition hearing, at one point he says to Sisko, after I win this, I want to defend Worf.
Yeah.
Get it back to Klingon. Because all he cares about is the battle in the courtroom.
But he's not, unlike a lot of the other stereotypical Klingons, he's not savage, he's not animalistic, he's mostly composed throughout the whole thing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, he's a very interesting character, or Klingon character.
Yeah, played by Ron Canada, by the way, who's been in a bunch of Star Trek.
And I love the thing between Sisko and Ch'Pok with the care to step onto my battlefield.
Oh, when Sisko says, care to step onto my battlefield, that's classic peak Sisko. It really is an awesome, awesome episode. And when I start going through these, I realize it's going to be my number 1. It's just the perfect courtroom showdown.
Great pick. And I have to say, normally in any like legal show, when you have a character who just conveniently happens to get baited at the right moment during a trial or an interrogation, that usually annoys me. Like if they had just kept their mouth shut, they would have, not been convicted. But this is an example where it totally works. Like it does. I mean, it's a great episode.
This is work. When he punches him, it's like,
it's in character, and it actually makes the episode more interesting as opposed to just sort of being a convenient way for someone to get a conviction.
Right. Well, sometimes you get like the cheesy way, and sometimes you can't handle the truth, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well said. I love it. All right.
And they even managed to stick some comedy in there. I just love the whole Quark's thing with, have you ever seen the wormhole open?
It's so great. And he's like relaying all he's telling them what.
And just as about, like, you're about to hear Morn talk, it's like, can we get back to business now?
And when Quark's telling the story, he's trying to remember which Davo girl was sitting at the table. And he's like, keeps changing. Brilliant. Awesome episode. All right, let's get into some secondary system picks. Any you want to rattle off, Claire?
So I wasn't going to choose it, but I do want to give a shout out to, again, A Matter of Perspective, which is another one of those silly TNG episodes that I have a real soft spot for.
It's a great courtroom showdown. That's really
it is, and it takes the unreliable narrator device and turns it into unreliable witnesses, and you get comedy. I mean, Riker's gonna be exonerated, but it's funny, and "You're not the fool I take you for," or "I'm not the fool you take me for," is a line that will echo through my head for the rest of my life. I also want to give a shout out to Tribunal, the Deep Space Nine episode where O'Brien is given a quote trial that is entirely a kangaroo court fake trial. The outcome is already known. It's a great episode anyway. It gives you a lot of intrigue and insight into the Cardassian legal system. But I really just want to talk about it because Makbar, the female, judge, her hair is the most bizarre and interesting wig I think I've ever seen on Star Trek. To the point that I have paused this episode like multiple times just to try and figure out what is going on with her hair.
Of course you have, Claire.
Deep down it's a wig, but like if you're thinking in universe, it's like, how does she make her hair do that?
Her hair is a nun's wimple, like the flying nun.
Yeah.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
What makes that episode for me, Claire, is his is O'Brien's quote unquote defense attorney. Where he's just like, I'm so sorry for my client.
He just wants to lose.
Yeah.
That's a good one because it's the only time you really get to see
and he's so pissed off that it's taking so long for him to be convicted.
Yeah, his concern is not at all. I mean, but again, that's the Cardassian way. The verdict was determined before the trial was called. Yeah.
All right. Any more on your list, Claire?
A couple of it, like First Duty. A couple, actually, most of the rest of mine were were picks for you guys. So.
All right, Matt, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I will give a shout out though too. It's a trial, but it's a trial, like I said, that has a non-punishment outcome at the end of Star Trek 4.
That's good. Yeah, I thought that.
I mean, it is a hearing. It is,
it's more like a debriefing almost.
It's a debriefing, but like your severe punishment is you get reduced in rank to captain, and by the way, here's your new ship.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. All right, I'm just going to rattle off a bunch because I had so many on my list. My toughest cuts were Death Wish, which Claire picked, and The Outcast. I really wanted to include The Outcast. I think the ending scene there, it's really sad, but I think they did a great job with that hearing section. And some of my secondary systems picks that weren't mentioned include Devil's Due, The House of Work, actually Observer Effect, because I love the way Archer pleads to the Organians at the end of that. Stigma is one because there was a lot of back and forth with T'Pol and the Vulcans. I actually like Repentance, which is one where
that's an odd one.
7 of 9. It's a kind of a weird episode, but 7 is really emotionally effective in that when she's trying to defend this murderer. Barge of the Dead is a good one because of B'Elanna trying to get her mom to Sto-vo-kor. Dax, the Cardassians, A Session is one because I love the ending where Alorum, Lacor, whatever his name is, and Cisco are facing the prophets of who's the emissary. And then, of course, from TOS, Court Martial, and the Squire of Gothos, just because of that iconic shot with the noose next to Kirk. Love that.
Really, you're not going to go with the deadly ears from
No.
We're somehow. I love that episode just for the fact that McCoy's idea of getting older is just to become more Southern.
Yes.
And my one special shout out was Sins of the Father, which has an amazing scene at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Duras and Worf, and Kempek is still fat. All right.
There was a line that was sort of blurry for me where you go from like courtroom type proceeding to political proceeding, or where it's like.
Yeah, there's a few of those it's but like a hearing. I mean, there's still kind of a decision being made by somebody in a. But you're right, courtroom.
Oh yeah,
politics is a little bit.
Not saying that Sins of the Father doesn't fit, but it was for my personal cutoff. Yeah. I was like, I'm gonna
for sure
make my list shorter.
Can't wait to see what everyone sends in on their list. I think we'll get a lot of responses on this one. All right, great conversation. Now it's time to wind this episode down with our weekly regeneration cycle.
Computer, activate regeneration cycle. Alcoves beta and gamma.
All right, we're going to run through a quick recap of our picks. So, Claire, why don't you break down your 5 picks?
At number 5, I have Justice from TNG. Number 4, Death Wish, Voyager. Number 3, The Die Is Cast, Deep Space Nine. Number 2, The Drumhead, Next Generation. And number 1, The Measure of a Man, Next Generation.
Awesome picks. You had 3 from TNG, 1 from DS9, and 1 from Voyager. 90s Trek representing there. Matt, what about break down your list?
Well, I got 3 movies, so I guess I'm the movie guy this go around. So my number 5 was the scene in Pike's office in Star Trek Into Darkness. Number 4 was the Michael Burnham trial at the end of Battle of the Binary Stars. Number 3 was the Kobayashi Maru hearing from Star Trek 2009. Number 2 was the trial and mostly the Ready Room scene from The First Duty from TNG. And my number 1 was Kirk and McCoy's trial from Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country.
Yeah, that's such a great list. You had 2 Kelvin timeline picks.
I love that Kelvin timeline. What can I say?
Yep, we all do here at TrekRanks. 1 from Discovery, 1 from TNG, and a TOS film as well. And then my top 5 were Judgment from Enterprise, my number 5. My number 4 pick was The Menagerie, parts 1 and 2 from TOS. And my number 3 pick was Voyager's Distant Origin. Number 2 pick was from TNG, All Good Things, and Encounter at Farpoint. And my number 1 pick was from Deep Space Nine, Rules of Engagement. So I had 1 each from Enterprise, Voyager, TNG, Deep Space Nine, and the original series, which is very rare, 1 from each. But I also had, I can't even count, I had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I had 9 hours of Trek on my list. I had 3 2-parters and 3 1-parters. So,
but I think it's awesome, like you said, that we managed to hit all 6 series. We had a movie, we had the Kelvin timeline, and we had everything integrated.
Yeah, the breakdown. So here's the breakdown. So there's no duplicates, which is also rare. And the breakdown was 1 pick each from Enterprise and Discovery, 2 from the Kelvin timeline, 2 from Voyager, 2 from Deep Space Nine, and 2 from TOS. And leading the way was Next Generation with 6 picks, mostly because of my double pick.
I mean, every time you turned around on TNG, there was a trial.
Yeah, that's a Picard thing. For sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Picard's he's that kind of character. He brings out the deep judicial legal proceedings in people.
I only hope he has such a sharp legal mind still when we get the new series.
Can't wait. And as we do every week at this time, we've once again entered a temporal causality loop. So before we can depart, it's time to hear from you.
The Enterprise has been caught up in a temporal causality loop, and I suspect that something similar may have happened to you.
This week, we're jumping back to episode 46 in our top 5 Enterprise underrated. This is one of our favorite series here. We got a bunch of awesome picks back for Enterprise, and I'm going to rattle off really quick. First up, Captain Revo, who is at Captain_Revo on Twitter. He chose First Flight as his underrated episode, so I love that pick. And his underrated characters, he had 2, were Degra and Commander Dahlem from the Xindi. So I wanted to highlight those because those are all awesome picks. Another cool pick came in from Brian Yates, who's on Twitter at history_Trek. And he chose The Boomers, and the glimpse into early freighter life is one of his underrated elements of Enterprise. Love that facet of the show, which we'd seen a little bit more of it. But glad we got to see glimpses of it, as Brian said. And then finally, our good friend Jen S., who is at EatAtQuarks on Twitter. She had an awesome list that included the gorgeous Warp 5 engine, quote unquote, as her element. And I love that because it really is gorgeous. And then she also picked Columbia NX-02 Captain Eric Hernandez as her underrated character. And her underrated episode was Hatchery. So awesome list from Jen. Awesome picks all around. And as always, that's more than enough to get us out of this week's temporal causality loop. So thanks again to everyone for all the feedback. Keep those lists coming to me at TrekRanks. We can retweet them. But we also want to hear from you too. So please put together your own list of top 5 Courtroom Showdowns and give us a call. You can call us at the Tricorder Transmissions at 609-512-5527. That's 609-512-LLAP. So hopefully we'll hear from you so you can be featured on the next episode of TrekRanks. And on the next episode of TrekRanks, we're doing our top 5 ships. It's episode 50, so we figured we need to do something big. And this is the topic that I hear from people more than any other on Twitter chiming in on when we're going to do our top 5 ships. So not sure exactly how we're going to define it yet. Might add some qualifiers. So for now, I'm just going to call it top 5 ships, and we're going to hear from Claire and Matt without any qualifiers. What would you choose off the top of your head as one of your top 5 ships?
Oh my God.
Claire.
Miranda class, the Grissom, the one that explodes ignominiously, and kind of appropriately, which is a really bad thing to say, but it's true.
Right.
And the Phoenix. Love the Phoenix.
Oh, yes. The Phoenix is awesome. Oh, it's so great. Matt, rattle off. What are your...
Oh, God. You know what? I need to see more of it, but I absolutely love what they're doing with the Enterprise on Discovery. Can I just say, like,
yeah, no, I don't disagree. I'm excited to see it.
The updating of the visual while still maintaining the TOS quote unquote look, I thought was amazing. But for me personally, because it came out right when I was getting into Star Trek as a kid, and it was a ship that wowed me from the beginning. I have such a real warm place in my heart for the Sovereign class, so the Enterprise.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's a beautiful ship.
I can't wait to get into that episode. Some of the qualifiers we're considering are whether we do like alien ships or Starfleet ships or maybe like 24th century or unrequited ships, same-sex ships. Oh.
What is unrequited?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Apostrophe ships.
Ships.
Okay.
Oh, we just everybody.
Oh. Can I be on that one?
You just made Claire's head explode.
Yeah.
She's like you're like one of the androids in iMud where your necklace lights.
Pretty much. I'm like, what is an unrequited ship? Oh.
Who knows what it's going to be? Who knows what it's going to be? That's next on TrekRanks. Okay, we're going to see what happens on episode 50 of TrekRanks. All right, we're going to wrap it up here. Huge thanks to Claire Little and Matt Hansen, 2 of our favorite guests. Any final Trek thoughts? Do you want to throw in a ship now?
Crap.
Just say C7. Just say C7.
C7?
Chakotay and 7.
Oh, no.
Oh, God.
Oh, yes.
No.
Okay.
It's one of the worst.
Oh, stop it.
God.
Stop it. All right, we're done. Thanks again for engaging with us here on episode 49 of the TrekRanks podcast. As always, I want to close by saying I'm looking forward to standing with you again here in this place where I belong.
I'm sorry if you feel it puts you at a disadvantage.
On the contrary, I look forward to fighting on your terms.
This is not a fight. It's the search for the truth.
The truth must be won. I'll see you on the battlefield.
Admiral, I apologize for interrupting your deliberations, but I have some new evidence I'd like to present.
Very well.
I'd like Advocate Chapak to evaluate the evidence as an expert witness on the Klingon Empire.
I will not compel you to testify, Advocate.
Care to step onto my battlefield?
Hi there, thanks again for listening. If you're cruising the galaxy looking for even more Trek talk, why not visit our good friends Bill and Dan over at TrekGeeks.com? They've got a great podcast that covers a wide range of Star Trek topics, so you're sure to find something you'll love. And if you're in the mood for some awesome tunes, then you really need to head over to 5yearmission.net. The guys are writing a song for every episode of the original series, and each one is absolutely brilliant. So that's TrekGeeks.com and 5yearmission.net. Check them out today.
One more thing to leave you with before we get out of tonight's great episode of TrekRanks, and we just mentioned this in our temporal causality loop there. Next episode of TrekRanks is episode 50, so we are going to run a special contest, our 50 episodes of TrekRanks sweepstakes, and it's going to be awesome. First, let me run through the prize package of what we're doing, and it's pretty solid. We got a lot of stuff to give away. It's one big grand prize winner we'll take home. Here's a quick rundown. Fantastic Starfleet Academy Letterman's jacket, size extra large, so hopefully you got someone that will fit. A model from the Eagle Moss Starship Collection, the Argo shuttle from Star Trek Nemesis. We've also got the awesome Star Trek Origins Blu-ray release with a handful of episodes on it from the original series. We've got a Mirror Universe Tribble, a Starship Enterprise bottle opener, a Mego Sulu action figure. That one's not in the box, but it's basically brand new. An awesome set of Star Trek glassware, a Star Trek t-shirt, size large. We've got one of those really nice Discovery Command badges with the magnetic clasp from QMX. And if all that wasn't enough, the awesome guys over at Fansets heard we were doing this sweepstakes and volunteered a prize package of some great Fanset pins. So we'll include those as well, including Stamets, Colbert, Laurel, and lots more. So it's a great package, and your chances of winning are pretty good. So here's how we're gonna do this. So we've never really done anything like this before, and listen, let me be clear. I don't do this show for clicks or likes or prominence or anything like that. I think that's pretty clear. It's just kind of a DIY love affair with Trek, because as you know, I love talking about Star Trek. But everyone keeps telling me that I should be pushing people to leave reviews and whatnot because it helps people find the show. So I decided this one time I'm going to ask everyone that wants to enter the sweepstakes to do that as part of the contest. So here are the 3 steps to enter the 50 episodes TrekRanks sweepstakes. Okay, first, go somewhere and leave us a review about how you feel about the show. iTunes or whatever podcast service you use to listen to the show. Leave us a review, but also as part of that review, I want you to leave us your top 5 favorite TrekRanks topics through 50 episodes. Because this is TrekRanks. That's what I want to hear about. I care more about that than your love or hate of the show. But of course you can leave that too. But yeah, so leave us your top 5 favorite Trek Ranks topics wherever you find and listen to your podcast. And by the way, if you want to send us those on Twitter too, I'd love to get those. But that won't enter you in the contest. It needs to be like on iTunes Review or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, step 2. Also, include in your review your answer to this question. In episode 49 of Trek Ranks, the one you're listening to right now, which was our countdown of top 5 courtroom showdowns, how many times did I play the dun-dun sound from Law & Order? You know the one. All right, I've added this step in here to make this more than just a blind luck contest. So if you listen to episode 49, the one you're listening to now, and tell me how many times you hear that Law & Order sound effect, then at the very least, your odds are pretty greatly increased to win this contest. All right, and finally, step 3, you need to send me a link about where you left this review, and you need to do that on Twitter, because if you don't tell me on Twitter, trust me, I'm never going to see it. I'm not looking for that stuff. So the only way you're going to officially enter this is if I see that review. So link me on Twitter, and only one entry per person. All right, so if you do all of those things, you'll be entered in our 50 episodes of Trek Ranks sweepstakes. And as the only other little qualifier to all that, I'll say that if more than one person gets the exact right answer on that Law & Order drop, then we'll draw lots on who's the grand prize winner. And yes, we're doing this worldwide. I'm going to send this package to whoever wins, no matter where they are in Sector 001.
We're going to run this contest through the launch of episode 52 of Trek Ranks, so the deadline to enter is the end of day on Stardate, March 21, 2019. And if you missed any of that, well, you can hit that 30-second rewind button. This is not radio, people. It's podcasting. Just go backwards, and you can listen to it again. And we can't wait to hear from you.